So I can do two paths for this presentation. I can go very quickly and summarize and get to the beer, or I can give more detail. So you can choose. If I'm giving too much detail, then just say skip and go on to the next one.
I want to know all the details.
I'm going to give you a lot.
Why don't you split your presentation into two pieces and we can try your beer 2 times?
Oh, because not enough. I should have brought more. So,
it's enough.
Okay, so the beer, basically, I started learning how to brew this year, in the summer, and I have a friend who, actually I have to meet him tonight, but he's been teaching me. He's going to America next week, so he gave me all of his equipment.
Wow!
Actually, I'm going to pay him something, but he gave me. But it's too much, so I feel bad because it's really expensive, some of the stuff, and he made a lot of it by hand. So, but he's been teaching me how to make, and I started as a hobby, and I really like it. It's very fun. So I want to. Now I'm just practicing. So you're my guinea pigs. To just if I get better, now I'm not good enough. But if I get better, maybe I want to start selling to some small pubs.
Maybe we can make a pub.
We'll see. Doctor's pub, yeah. That's healthy. It's organic. So beer, basically, it's very simple. It's been around for years and years, but it's basically boiled wort. It's O-R-T, but it's pronounced wort.
Wort.
Like an E.
Like wort, like the
Wort.
little mole.
That's wort. That's wort.
I'm sorry.
You can't tell the difference, wort and wort, but it's a little different. So it's basically wort is malted barley, drained of its sugar into water. So you take basically barley and they cook it, roast it until it malts, and then they crush it, and then you order it from them crushed, and that's all the sugars come out in the hot water. So that's important because you need the sugar in the beer. And then it's also hops, which is like a plant, green plant, that gives flavor and aroma. That smell that you can sometimes smells like a plant smell in beer. That's hops and bittering. So the amount of hops and how long you cook it gives how bitter the beer is. So you can depends on the recipe.
Write down, guys. Write down.
Yeah, write it down. And then yeast. Of course, you need yeast. This makes you drunk. So you need lots of yeast. So
It's no fun.
right. But if you just boil wort and put hops in it, you can actually drink it. I usually do after to see if the taste is okay before I ferment it. But it just tastes like tea, like barley tea. So, yeah, it's good. It tastes good. But
have you ever drink McCorn?
what?
McCorn.
Korean barley drink.
Barley
That's soda?
flavor.
That's barley flavor?
Yeah, barley soda.
Really? I didn't know that.
It's there.
Oh, I never knew that.
It's a Korean version of root beer.
Oh,
Not
I didn't know
the
No,
minty
I
thing.
I don't like it.
My
This
husband
has
loves
no carbonation yet, so it's just like flat tea. But then when you put yeast in it and it ferments, then you get alcohol. And time, you need time, because it takes time, so you have to be very patient.
How long does it take to make that?
I'll tell you.
So ambitious.
One thing at a time. Yeah, good students. So, first step, there's 10 steps to brewing a good beer. Well, there's more, but I'm going to give you the short version. So 10 basic steps. First, you have to slow down. Clean and sanitize all your equipment. It's the most important step, because even if you make a mistake in any other area, usually the beer can still be delicious. But if you don't clean well and don't sanitize well, your beer is going to be ruined. So, because the bacteria,
Sterilized.
right?
We need
Not sterilized.
aseptic.
So
just like cocktails.
How do you clean it?
So you clean with your bottle brushes. And first you use Oxy. What's that? Regular cleaner, the Oxy.
Something,
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Is that Yuan Lux?
Right. It just cleans
I don't know.
basic junk off. And then you have to use this. I use this product, Star San. It's a sanitizer where you mix it with water and then it basically sanitizes. There's other ones like bleach and iodine, but this one's the best because you can leave. You don't rinse it with water. You just leave it. You drain it. So like if that's, I just drain that and I can still put beer in even if it has bubbles and it doesn't hurt the beer. So this one's good. Bleach and iodine are two. You have to rinse it really well, and so this one's easy. Very simple, and you can only buy it in America, so I have to buy more when I go back. So, but yeah, so when you sanitize it, anything that's going to touch the beer, you have to sanitize it first, or else some bacteria can
So
eat your beer.
It's like canning, making jellies and
same thing,
preserves. You have to. Well, I usually steam it.
Yeah, you can do it with heat too. You could clean with heat, but nobody has a dishwasher big enough.
That's true.
So we sanitize, right? So step 2, mash the grains. You order grain depending on the recipe.
Recipe.
You can. Every recipe has a basic grain, which is like this one called Pilsner, which is like a basic light grain.
What's the black one?
And then you can add different ones depending on the recipe. So like darker ones, like this one. This one's kind of like a oat one I've never used before, but there's hundreds of grain. But in Korea, you can only get a few from Germany. They're all German grains. There's grains from all over the world, but the Korean companies only sell German ones. So that's why all of the Korean brew houses, it's always German beer. So it's good. I like it, but there's many other kinds of beer, but Korea doesn't get it yet. So we have to, So, but anyway, you get the grain and it's malted, so they've cooked it, and then they crush it. Unless you can do it if you have a grain crusher, but I don't. So they crush it because the crushing it lets the sugars come out when you soak it. So you put it in. This is called a mash tun. My friend gave me this one like this, and it's a cooler, one of those big coolers. But he cut a hole and put this nozzle in it, and this is a
Heat.
tube. It's like a mesh tube where lets the water go through, but stops the grain from coming. Because you put the grain inside like this, and then put hot water in it, and you have to let it sit for about 1 hour or hour and a half in the hot water, because then the hot water takes the sugar out and the enzymes and everything out of the grain. So then after you finish letting it sit for a while, then you have to drain it from here, and the water comes out, but the grain stays inside. So that's what this is for. So
Very small.
then you just throw the grain away in the toilet or something.
That's a waste.
Very important.
Can I eat?
Yeah, you can eat these. I eat them before I brew to check the flavor too. So they're very good. You can kind of get an idea of what kind of flavors will be in the beers. But after you drain it, they're useless because everything's gone. The sugar is all.
Maybe I can steam and eat it.
Maybe it wouldn't be good though, because it would just be empty. Before though, if you do it before, then it tastes good. So after
the difference between dark beer and pale beer is
the grains,
grain.
right? Yeah.
Really?
So I brought one here the first one I did is a really dark beer by accident. I wanted to make a dark beer, but it became really, really dark because I put too much sugar.
Actually, it was called black beer, right?
More than black.
It's black.
Yeah.
Black.
Yeah, they have some grains are like caramel. They have caramel flavor, chocolate, kind of chocolatey flavors because they burn them, and some are kind of like coffee flavors. Depends on the recipe, but I want to do more, but there's kind of limited options in Korea. So when I go to America, I want to buy, but They only come in like
Really
this,
huge.
yeah. So
Can you buy?
Can't you order
In-
online?
I could order if I want to do like a big. So later, if I do it professionally, then I'll have to do big orders. But it's
So
it's not worth it.
So it really depends on the flavor, the different kinds of grain, but also how much roasting that went on.
And that's all up to the malters. So like I had nothing to do with that process. So they do, the malters do half the job before you even get the grain. And breweries too. They don't roast their own malt. That's a different department. So even breweries have to order the grain. So
Awesome.
then step 3, after you let it sit for about an hour, hour and a half, and drain. There's a special way to drain it, but I won't bore you with that part. Then you have to boil the wort. So it comes out in this kind of ugly brown liquid,
Looks
and
like
you
melted
get a
chocolate.
stainless steel pot like this one. I have a big one about this big.
Wow, big.
And then you boil it for. Usually the recipe is either 60 minutes or 90 minutes, depends on the kind of beer you want to make. But and as you boil it, you have to, you heat it up, and it takes a while because it's so much. But once it starts bubbling, once it starts boiling, then you start the timer, 60 or 90 minutes, and it becomes the boiling kind of brings out the sugars and caramelizes it a little bit, and it's really helpful for everything. Gets rid of the oxygen, all of that, and then it's. But you have to be careful because it looks like this person didn't do a good job because if it boils over, it could ruin the beer. So you have to really watch it carefully. So you can't just do it and go away. You have to.
Do you stir it?
No, not really. A little bit. To stir in the hops, which I'll talk about next.
Oh, okay.
So the hops, when you're boiling, these are what hops look like when they're on the tree.
Those look like pellets, though.
Yeah, so they put them into pellet form when you buy them. You can buy them in pellet or flake or pellet form. So I usually get pellets, but yeah, so they look like rabbit food.
It also looks like cat litter.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
But it smells really good. It smells. I used them all this week, but I would have brought some. They smell good. And then you put, as you're boiling, you put the hops in the wort as it's boiling. But depending on how much bitterness you want, it depends on what time. So if you put them in early in the boil,
It'll be bitter.
then it's more bitter because the IBUs that are in there, they come out and they stay a long time. But if you want a little bit and just the smell and the aroma, you put it at the end. And then most recipes have like 60-minute, 30-minute, and then 10 minutes from the boil. You put in different kinds, so it depends on the recipe. The one I did on Wednesday, I made a new batch. It's fermenting now. That recipe only called for one thing of hops at 60 minutes. So maybe it'll be bitter, but no smell, no hop smell. So, but some of them, if you get a beer and it smells really hoppy, that means they put the hops in at the end. Got it?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. You're going to be experts. And then you have to, when it's finished boiling, you have to cool the wort. This is a very important part. Because the hop break is very important to release the enzymes and everything, and the cool break is also very important because you can't just let it sit and get it has to be room temperature when you put the yeast in, because the yeast will die or go dormant if it's too hot. So it has to be room temperature, but you can't just leave it until it gets to room temperature because, as you know, when things are getting cooler, then bacteria can get in and get contaminated. So you have to cool it quickly, as fast as you can. So they have this thing. My friend made this too and gave it to me. It's basically copper tubes hooked up to hoses, and you put one on your sink.
Cold water
nozzle. Yeah, and you run cold water through it. You put it in the copper inside the wort 10 minutes before it's finished, so it can sanitize as it's boiling. And then when you finish, turn it off and turn the water on, and it goes through. One end goes in the sink, just basically cooling it, and it works really quickly, like 10-15 minutes. It's room temperature.
Wow.
So that's a fun little process. And
How
then
much is it?
well, he made it.
He built it.
It's actually cheap, I think, because the hose and the copper. He actually bought it all in Korea, so I think you can do it in Korea even with in the hardware store. Just buy
Right.
some copper tubing and bend it, and then it said it was really easy and cheap. So I'll try again later.
Then what do the breweries in the olden days do?
Oh, the breweries have this is all for home brewing. So breweries have like big, those big golden tanks.
Yeah, right.
Those are the fermenters, and then some of them they have the grain mashers that are like my grain masher but much bigger. And inside when they boil, the boilers they have like cooling inside already built in.
But what about like medieval times? Like
medieval, yeah, I don't know.
they brewed. Okay, never mind. I'm just interested in when those big machines were built. How did people cool it?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay, I'll do my
Well,
research.
I think they probably had something similar to this one.
The coil, yeah.
Something, not this one, but something, because it's very simple to make, and they probably thought of something like that. Maybe on the outside of the thing, I don't know. But or they may have just let it cool at room temperature, and it's just not as good. But now modern brewing, they try to make the best beer possible.
Right.
I think back then they didn't really care because.
It was just for drinking.
Yeah, just for drinking. They didn't have refrigerators, so everything was
You
full.
some hot beer.
Every beer was hot in the Middle Ages, I think.
Hot beer.
Yeah. Well, unless it was wintertime. So,
Even then they heated it.
so then step 6, you have to rack to the fermenter. So this is the fermenter. It's called a carboy. You can use a bucket like this one or a glass carboy. The bucket's fine. I have one too, but the glass one you can see the fermentation, so you can. This one you can't see, and it's locked with a lid. So if there's some problem, you don't know until you open it, and then suddenly it smells bad or something. But this one you can kind of see what's happening. So I like it better. But I almost broke mine this week, so
Ooh.
you have to be careful. They're kind of heavy, and they could break. But this is racking. So there's two ways. You can rack directly from the pot into here, just siphon, auto siphon, and then it goes in. Or you can rack to another bucket like this one, and then into it. That gets rid of some of the junk on the bottom because you don't want all that junk in the beer. But sometimes it's good in the bottom of the fermenter. It makes the beer taste good too. So you could choose. And then you have to pitch the yeast. This is liquid yeast that comes in these kind of packages. There's also some dry ones, but liquid yeast is best, I think. It's easiest to warm up and get ready. So when you pitch it, you can go directly in like this, or a better way, what I do is make a starter the night before. You boil some water and put the yeast. Do the same process but smaller, like this, just little couple 2 liters of water, and then put the yeast in and swirl it a lot to get the yeast kind of warmed up. Because if you just throw them in, sometimes they're too lazy. So you have to warm them up. Starter. So you make a starter, and then the next day they're ready to. It's like appetizer. They eat the sugar in that, and then when you pitch it into here, then they're ready to go.
Happy.
Yeah, they're happy. It works really well because the one I made the other day was bubbling, and you're supposed to splash it a lot at this point because this is the only time when you need oxygen. Every other time oxygen is bad, but here you have to splash it around because they get a lot of oxygen in the work.
You want the bubbles?
From the picture, probably there are like different types of yeast, right?
Yeah, lots of different kinds.
Ale and I see lager.
Yeah,
Belgian,
German, Irish
So
ale,
the type of
California.
yeast is really important.
Yeah, actually, yeast.
Flavor.
Most brewers don't think it is, but it really, like different yeasts do different things to the flavor, so it's very important. I don't know much about it yet, so I want to learn more because the yeast actually changes the flavor a lot. So.
I'm wondering if you can actually make those yeast at home because
Maybe.
I've been doing my research on baking bread,
Oh, yeah.
and some people are culturing their own yeast out of fruit and dried fruit and stuff. And the easiest one I saw was the raisin. You just put sugar, raisin, and some water, and let it basically go like bad,
Yeah.
basically, in a glass container, and
Uh-huh.
it gives you that yeast.
Wow.
So I'm wondering maybe you like someone can use raisin yeast and make like raisin beer.
Kimchi beer.
I'm just
This
thinking. I was gonna ask.
Then
These
we
are-
don't need anju.
Included.
These are different than bread yeast.
Okay.
Brewing yeast is different than bread yeast, so I don't really know how it works, but usually people just buy these. And then step 8, you have to airlock it with this airlock and let it sit for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And this airlock, it blocks the oxygen, and it has here, there's like a tube and a cap, and you fill it with sanitizer. So oxygen can't go in, but the gas can come out. So it
So
bubbles.
it doesn't explode.
It does explode. Mine, when we finished on Wednesday, I came home and it's everywhere. I filled it too full. I filled it this full. Usually it's supposed to be here. I filled it here, and it was going crazy. So I had to make a different. You can also put a tube here and run it to a bowl of water and sanitize water, and then it comes out. And so I did that, and it's working now. But I hope I didn't contaminate it. So, and then it does this for about 2 days or 3 days. It'll active fermentation. It's bubbles and it gets really noisy and it's fun to watch.
Noisy.
And then
Yeah, they go.
yeah, it makes a lot of bubbles are coming out and
That's what
it's,
happens when you're baking.
So then you leave it, and then after about 3 days it kind of calms down, and then for another week and a half it just kind of sits there, but it's actually still fermenting, just quietly. So then,
How about the temperature outside the bar?
yeah, that's important. You
Like,
usually about 70 degrees Fahrenheit is good for yeast for ales. Ale and lager are different. Ale needs about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is I don't know how much Celsius, but
You figure it out.
yeah.
that's okay.
So ale is that, and it's faster. It takes about 2 weeks for ale. So this summer, that's all I've made so far are ales. But lager needs colder temperature, about 40 degrees, 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and it takes about 6 to 8 weeks. So this winter, when I go to America, before I go, I'm gonna make a lager and just sit it in a room with no heat and just let it sit for like 2 months.
Probably the season determines the types.
Right,
of
yeah.
beers you can make, right?
Yeah. Unless you have like a conditioned room, but I don't. So. It's actually difficult in Korea because the floor is heated. I can't put it on the floor now. I realized that it was gonna get cooked, so I had to move it.
Yeah.
Well, that's how they make doenjang. So.
I know, it might be good, I don't know. So then, bottling.
Wow.
The next step is step 9 is bottling. After 2 weeks, you can bottle, and
With the
basically to bottle, you have to use this kind of auto siphon again,
Nice.
tube into a bucket, and don't get the
Most
bottom
exciting one.
stuff underneath. And then from there, you can put it in the bottles. But first, you have to make a sugar solution. You take sugar and water and boil it, and then mix it in here, swirl it around, and before you bottle, because if you just bottle it like this, it's okay, but it would be no carbonation because the yeast are finished, they're full.
Okay.
So you put sugar in it and put it in the bottle and then cap it with the capper, and then it locks it in there, and the yeast get dessert. They start eating the sugar again,
We
just
should
a little
feed
bit, just a little bit, and then it's trapped though. There's no bubbles can't get out, so it's trapped. So when you open it, that's the carbonation. So very helpful. But my first one, I didn't do it right, so no carbonation.
Did it still taste good though?
Yeah, it tastes great, but flat. But it was weird. We had a bunch of them, and all of them we opened and drank, and then one had this much carbonation. Just one. I don't know why. So it was strange. Everything else was flat, but one was. We'll see about this one. I don't know. So then you let it sit in the bottles for no light, out of the light, and let it sit for about. After 1 or 2 weeks is okay, but it gets better with time. So these that I've been drinking for the last 2 months or so, they're getting better and better every time I drink it. So it's fun to kind of watch the progression. When I first drank it, it tastes, oh, it's good, but a little weak, and then now it's like, whoa, lots of flavor, but then after about a year, 6 months to a year, it starts to get off flavors. So it could get like kind of soapy flavor or
Stale.
yeah, or like with like a cardboard kind of flavor or
Ew.
grassy flavor. So
Cardboard.
Correct.
yeah, so you have to kind of finish it before a year, but that's plenty of time.
Won't last you that long.
So then you can drink up.